Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Futurist Society. I am your host, Dr. Awesome, and we are talking in the present, but we are talking about the future. I'm really excited to speak with Dr. Kasia Gora today. She's the CTO of SciFi Foods, which is doing some pretty interesting stuff in the food space. Kasia, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you started innovating in the food industry.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you, Dr. Awesome. So my name is Dr. Kasia Gora, and yep, I am the co-founder and CTO of SciFi Foods, and we're working on the future of food. Specifically, we're imagining the future of animal agriculture, where we can make all the meat that we want without any of the ethical or sustainable issues that we face today.
So you're talking about meat that's grown by bacteria, is that correct?
No.
Okay.
No bacteria
How
here.
is it
Well, the
grown?
bacteria are great. I don't want to give bacteria a bad rap.
Sure.
They're fantastic. No, we're not doing sort of what folks might be a little bit more familiar with, which is, using precision fermentation to make certain proteins that people want to eat. We're taking that one step further. We're actually growing animal cells outside of the animal. Specifically, we work on beef at SciFi Foods. And so, yeah, we grow beef cells without the cow. So we grow them in stainless steel bioreactors. And that way we're able to make sustainable hamburgers, basically.
But how do you make cells from nothing? What is the machinery required to do something
Magic.
like that?
No,
Yeah.
I think we'd have to be God for that. No, we actually do start with cells. So we start with a cow biopsy. So we work with a farm in Ohio, and we're able to take small samples from young cows. And those basically biopsies are sent back to our laboratory in San Leandro, California. And then we start doing sort of our molecular magic, cell biology magic, in order to develop those cells into the cell lines that we grow in bioreactors. So they definitely start from a cow. It's just that cow continues to live, and we're actually working on cells that we've created from some original biological material.
And how far are we with this type of technology? Like, can I order a steak, or is it still in like the initial
Yeah.
stages?
Yeah. You actually can technically order some chicken if you go to Atelier Cren here in San Francisco. Upside Foods and Eat Just got regulatory approval to sell cultivated chicken. And so those are available in extremely limited quantities. So it's technically possible to try some cultivated meat. No one's gotten approval for cultivated beef yet. We're actually going through the regulatory process. We do make demo products in our lab in San Leandro, which we're able to offer to some people under informed consent, because again, it's not approved by the FDA or USDA quite yet. We're focused on burgers. So those are unstructured products. Basically, we're taking isolated plant proteins like soy and blending them with our cultivated cells to create the burger. That really helps us solve a bunch of technical issues. Specifically, the main challenge of cultivated meat is that it's just so expensive. It's expensive to grow animal cells in cell culture, but it's even more expensive to figure out how to structure those cells into a 3D structure like a steak. So right now we're focused on just growing the cells cheaply and using those cells as a flavor ingredient.
Interesting. So the amino acid profile is the same as beef. Everything's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It's beef cells.
Yeah, yeah. No, when you're talking about beef cells, when I think of the structure of a steak, right? Like you have not only the actual muscle component, but you have the tendon component, you have the fat component. So like, I can see you go to burgers and it being much more similar to what a person would normally experience. I'm just interested in trying it. And that's the thing is like, I've heard so much about this cultivated meat, but I haven't had any opportunity because I live on the East Coast. I know that there's some opportunities on the West Coast, Do you know if there's anything out there for regular people that just want to try this other than California?
It's just not broadly available. I
Yeah.
don't remember the name of Jose Andres restaurant in Washington, D.C. But Eat Just or Good Meat now, whatever they're called. They do have some very limited samples that you can try in that
Mhm.
restaurant, but it's not broadly available. The fundamental issue is cost and scale. So we're all in this industry working on figuring out how to make this economical and high volume. And right now, although we've gotten a couple of companies through regulatory approval, we're not at the point yet where we're actually manufacturing large volumes of this. But I think in the next couple of years, more and more Americans are going to be able to try cultivated meat as companies like SciFi Foods and others actually start scaling.
Have you tried it? Have you tried a burger?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. What's it
They're
taste like?
great. It tastes
Yeah.
like beef.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually amazing what cultivated cells can do as a flavor ingredient. They transform a plant-based product into something that actually tastes like conventional meat. So it's pretty amazing. I have to say, yeah, it was a fun journey because I tasted this the first time maybe 3 years ago, and my initial feelings were like, "Whoa, I don't even know how to think about this. I'm a biologist. I never eat
Mhm.
anything from my lab." It was a
Mhm.
really novel experience. But after doing it a few times, it's old hat now. So we're always excited when there's leftover sci-fi burgers. So
Yeah.
any opportunity I get, I eat a burger.
Yeah, if you ever have any leftovers and you wanna ship it to me just to try it, I'll give you my
I'm not sure how the FDA
assessment.
would think about that.
Yeah.
But hey, don't you should come visit the Bay Area
I
because
would love to. I would
we can
love to
do
eat
the
some
lab tour and we can
meat.
do a taste testing. But yeah, we only do it in our facility right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the next natural step, right? Like, everybody's talking about how terrible the industrial production of meat is. There's a lot of pushback to go backwards and have, these local farm movements and everything like that. But, I see the creation of industrially prepared humane meat as the way to go. I feel like it's such low hanging fruit. I personally don't know where there. I had another futurist on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he's like, I want to be in this space because the likelihood from like a change from like 1% to 100% is huge in a technology like this because we're literally in just like the building block stages. So I think that must be exciting. But I have heard from multiple different futurists just the excitement around this thing. Like it's not sci-fi anymore. It's actually science reality. And I'm sure that you're experiencing that a lot. A lot of people are probably coming to you and talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think this notion that we can solve some of our sustainability and ethical problems going back to traditional farming is interesting, but it doesn't, the numbers don't work out.
Hmm.
So with more humans on the planet and generally the population getting wealthier, which is fantastic, we want to take people and raise them out of poverty. People want to eat more and more meat, and we just don't have enough land mass to do that sustainably. So, you know, um, low efficiency kind of traditional farming doesn't make enough food for human society today, which is why we transformed our system into industrial agriculture, which has really been able for us to enable us to continue growing the human population. And so I don't think we can go back. I think there's always going to be a place for traditional agriculture. Like, we love traditional agriculture, but industrial agriculture where we chop down more of the rainforest and throw, millions of more animals into sort of these inhumane conditions really is not the technology we can use to continue like scaling food production. So I am really excited because I think cellular agriculture is going to transform the way that we eat. And so cellular agriculture is basically, instead of growing whole plants and animals, just focusing on growing individual cells of plants and animals in order to more efficiently produce food. Yeah, so I think it is absolutely the future of meat. I think there's a real question about how long it's going to take to scale this technology in a commercially viable way. But I'm really hopeful that we're going to see this really awesome, J curve like we did with solar power, which wasn't a thing 10 years ago. And now solar is basically like cheaper. It is the cheapest form of energy you can get, which is fantastic.
So I was talking about this at a dinner party the other day, and there was half of the room was interested in trying it, and the other half was a little bit hesitant to it, a little bit skeptical about it. What would you say to those people who are skeptical about it? because I think it seems to me like I can't even wrap my head around, their hesitance, but I do feel like there is a certain amount of pushback from anything that's too technically created, like GMOs and all this stuff. Like there's not a lot of science that says that this is bad for you. There's a lot of snake oil that's out there. So people have this reaction, and it's not necessarily based on science or anything like that. But regardless, point being is, what would you say to those naysayers?
I mean, just wait for your friends to try it and they'll tell you that it's great and maybe you'll
Mhm.
feel more comfortable. Novelty and can be scary. I think the reality is that our food today is mostly technical slash scientific. So when you like look behind the curtains of the food system, large food companies have teams of food scientists working in the lab day in, day out to create sort of the products people love. And when you go in the grocery store, like most of the stuff that you can buy in the US is actually processed, prepared food, right? It's not tomatoes or just vegetables or raw ingredients. It's actually these prepared foods that are highly technical. And so I think this illusion that the food that we eat today is somehow quote unquote natural, like it was 100 years ago, is just not true. But 100 years ago, people in the United States didn't have access to as much wonderful nutrition as we do today. So like not everything about the past was actually wonderful. Like we're in a world where there's much less food insecurity and we hardly have any, malnutrition, especially in the United States. Sometimes we have overnutrition. So there've been some challenges with the change in the food system and perhaps like not some challenging ways of eating that have developed for various reasons. But I don't think the cultivated meat seems really new and it is the next step in technology, but there's a lot of technology in your food already. But I think it's perfectly fine to sit back and watch as your kind of friends and neighbors and kids get into this thing because fundamentally it's just a hamburger. It tastes like a hamburger. We make it in a really controlled way. It has to go through regulatory approval. I think another interesting fact that people don't want to think about is if you think about how we manufacture cultivated meat in the lab, which is really clean, super sterile, very safe, controlled, and you think about what it looks like in a slaughterhouse, most people, if they saw both and they visited both facilities, would prefer to eat the
Yeah,
cultivated meat because
that's
um,
an interesting point.
yeah, the reality of modern animal agriculture is really unpleasant.
Yeah.
And nobody sits with it. Like, meat companies don't advertise that. They show
Hmm.
you a photo of a field and a cow.
Right.
But that's not the reality. And so we can show you a photo of this amazing, clean, light, and bright lab, and that is our reality. That's where we manufacture food. We don't manufacture in a lab. Um, R&D happens in a lab and manufacturing happens at a manufacturing facility, just like food, actually. So food R&D happens in food science labs and manufacturing happens in manufacturing facilities. It's really not that different.
That's interesting. I like the cleanliness aspect of it. I think that that's a good angle. I think that's something that, the common person that's not in it like me looks at, and I'm like, okay, that's an obvious benefit as opposed to industrial agriculture. I think that, just like you said, when I think about a butcher shop, that to me kind of gives me a little bit of disgust when I think about it, because I know like all the I know that that's not going to be the cleanest place in the world, but when I
And
think
that's way
about,
cleaner than where the cow came from before that.
right, but when I think about a sterile lab making my food, I'm like, okay, I could get behind this, right? Like there's something interesting about that I think that I've never really thought about before. So what about the texture? Like, that's something that my background is in the way that we chew things, and everything in the head and neck. And I've been learning a lot more about how our brain interprets food. And a lot of it is taste, but a lot of it is also like the non-tangible factors, right? Like texture, the people you're sitting with, the presentation, all those kind of things. So what about the non-tangibles? How does it stack up?
Yeah,
Like,
so we basically make a blended product, so we're mixing plant proteins with beef cells, and the outcome is like really similar to conventional beef. So
mhm,
there's been a lot of great development in texturized plant proteins over the
mhm,
last 5, 10 years with companies like
mhm,
Impossible and Beyond really doing a lot of work to develop those materials. And so now you can buy commercially available proteins and make something that has a texture that's very similar to a burger. So
Mm,
I would say the majority of people who do our taste test, and we've done more than 100 now, basically say like if you gave that product to them in a restaurant and said it was a beef burger, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
wow.
If you do it side by side, yeah, there's still some small differences between conventional beef and the blended cultivated product, but it's not significant. And certainly, like on its own, it basically gives you the experience of conventional beef.
And you have to cook it, right? I mean, that might sound like a dumb question, but it has to be cooked before somebody can eat it, similar to other meats, correct?
That's right. Yep, the cells are raw in the product, and then they are cooked.
Interesting. Interesting. So how long do you think it's going to be until we get that on our plates? Because I think that that's what everybody's thinking of. You know, this is a product that is just in the concept stages right now. But when, if you had a timeline, when would it be sitting in my local McDonald's or something like that?
Yeah, so we're going through regulatory now. So our goal is to be commercial toward the end of next year or early 2025. So I think I'm pretty bullish about people being able to order sci-fi burgers in a couple of restaurants um, in 2025. When I think about how long it's going to take to get cultivated meat into a grocery store, into grocery stores, my guess is probably about 5 years.
Hmm. Mm,
Um, which, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that long for like building a brand new industry and a brand new form of agriculture. Um,
hmm.
one of the challenges the industry faces is the capital intensity of cultivated meat. And the reason it's capital intensive is basically you have to build large cell culture facilities to be able to like scale up manufacturing. And unfortunately, in this really high interest rate environment, we've seen like a really big shift in how VCs are able to and want to deploy funding in order to get these industries up and going. And fundamentally, agriculture is like very important to the United States and our international competitiveness, food security. And in order to sort of get through the valley of death of scale up, where we have to spend a bunch of money to increase the volume of production, we're going to have to get some more types of help, especially government help, to help make those facilities a reality. Like, honestly, I think the technology is there, but I think the current economic environment is, if anything, really slowing us down at this point.
Hmm. How much of it do you think is just willpower? Because I feel like the economics aside, I'm not sure that people in the US, I think it's getting better, but I'm not sure that people in the US have as much of a focus on healthy meats or these kind of things. Like I think that people talk about it more than 10 years ago,
Yeah.
but still it hasn't reached that critical mass where everybody's talking about it. It's still like a select number of people that are pushing things like conscientious agriculture and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't think people are going to buy things because it's better for the environment,
Mm,
honestly. I think one trend that we are seeing and which will continue is the rising cost of meat, especially beef.
yeah.
That's what's going to get consumers at the end is as demand continues to increase, climate change puts more pressure on agriculture and causes more issues with manufacturing, industrial animal agriculture. We're going to see the prices continue to rise. And
Mm,
this world where Americans are used to eating basically as much as meat as they want all the time and it's super cheap is going to change. And that is basically a new market opportunity. Because if we can come in as manufacturers of cultivated meat and start actually delivering a reliable product
mm,
that is as good as conventional meat in terms of like the consumer um, perception and is at cost parity and then ultimately below the cost of of conventional meat, that's when we're really going to see traction. And I think that's really the goal is just getting the cost down so that we are the least expensive and best product on the market. But I mean, luckily, secular trends are in our favor because the reality is beef is going to continue getting more and more expensive, which gives us more room to get into the market and give people an alternative that actually, works for them.
mm. Interesting. Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, like what you're saying is accurate, that if you can get the price down, if the economics of scale work out in your favor, then it's going to be a no-brainer to choose cultivated meat versus regular meat. I hope for that day. Like I really am looking forward to the food revolution happening. Like I was really bullish on vertical farming. I bought myself like my own hydroponic setup here in my house,
Yeah.
and I was just like loving it. It's like this company called Garden, Gardyn, and you go to it, and it's like this 3 foot by 6 foot wall, and you would just pick at it. And I was like, this is something that's totally revolutionary. I'm so excited about it, but it just never gains steam, you know? And I feel like we're on the cusp of that. People are looking at the way that they eat and the way that they consume things, and they want to be more conscientious about it. But I think at the end of the day, it's just all about convenience. You know, if you can make it available in the grocery stores, like you say, right next to the other meat products, and it's cheaper, and I think people will go for it. What about you? I mean, do you see that? You're in the Bay Area, right? So like you had this big push with a lot of people that were into like vertical farming, and then it kind of died down. Do you worry that some of these trends affect your rise negatively? Like there's just there's a lot of people out there that are trying to revolutionize agriculture, but it still hasn't happened yet. What is different from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I think it is happening. I think
Mhm.
things are changing. Like if I go to my local Whole Foods, which I might do later today to get my groceries, I can pick up salad that's vertically farmed. So companies like I think Plenty and Gotham Greens are in the stores. They're using
Mhm.
vertical farming to produce food for folks. So I definitely think there's something happening. There is actual change. Um, do I worry about sort of these external forces? I don't worry about them because I can't control them. I think
Mhm.
that's the job of the innovator and the entrepreneur
Mhm.
is to develop technologies that make sense for the world today and tomorrow. And whatever is happening right now, it's our job to think about how we position ourselves as best we can in that context, and not really like worry about it too much because it's beyond our control.
Yeah.
um, but I think ultimately, if you can cost effectively deliver something amazing that the consumer wants to buy, then you're going to be able to move the needle. And that's like really why we focus on cost of goods and like product quality, because we know ultimately that's what wins.
So I like your name a lot, SciFi Foods, because I'm a big sci-fi fan, as you can obviously tell with my
Yeah,
background.
great background.
Thank you. So like what sci-fi were you thinking of when you named the company SciFi Foods? Like what was the reason for that?
So we did a lot of foundational work about who we are as a brand and what we stand for. And SciFi Foods was one of the sort of ideas that sort of came out of that project. And we're basically thinking about sort of the golden era of science fiction. So today, sci-fi is like pretty dystopian, but in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of really exciting, optimistic science fiction.
Hmm.
So science fiction and science can be viewed positively. We've done it before; it's totally possible. We're thinking about shows like Big Bang Theory. So for a while, Big Bang Theory was like the most popular show in the world, which is crazy because it's a
Yeah.
show about Caltech postdocs.
Hmm.
Who in the world would have thought that that would have been possible? I also went to Caltech, so I'm like, wow, that's kind of wild, I have to say. But because it's like it's optimistic and very human, and these are like lovable nerds, and there's actually a lot to relate to. So we're thinking of the kind of friendly utopian future sci-fi. It's a little whimsical and silly. If you look at our website, we have cows floating
I
around in
did.
bubbles.
Yeah, I
And
saw it very clearly.
yeah, it's really cheerful. And so we're excited. Like that's how, we feel about the future, that there's so much amazing stuff going on and it's gonna be great. And we want to, put that energy into our brand. And I think the other piece is we want to also be very transparent. So right now, there are a bunch of companies in cultivated meat. Generally, people tend to kind of find generic names that aren't very specific. But when you look at the media coverage of cultivated meat, everyone's like lab grown meat. And the science is like front and center. And
Mhm.
so we also thought like, look, we're proud that we make cultivated meat through science. That's the only way it's possible. And that's actually great. It's like more wholesome because of the science that we do across
Mhm.
many different vectors. And so yeah, we're excited to share that with everyone, especially younger consumers who are way more excited about the future of food than say older consumers love transparency and authenticity. So that's kind
Mhm.
of the ideas that went into SciFi Foods.
I love it. I love the whole vibe. I love the website. I really like the idea of utopian science fiction in general. I feel like we have a lot of dystopian out there. I still think there's some utopian elements that you can pick and choose from the different science fiction that's available right now. Like even something like Minority Report, which is like came out like, a couple decades ago. Dystopian, but still a lot of interesting technologies that I think inspired a lot of people that are making a lot of the wearables right now. And obviously there's a lot of, you know, carryover into the food industry when it comes to science fiction too. Like Star Trek has replicators, there's all these
I
interesting.
hate to break it to you, I don't think the replicator is coming anytime soon.
Yeah, I know it. I can't wait until it does. I
I
feel like
know, it'd be
I'm
so
really looking
cool.
forward to the post-scarcity society. I feel like that, just as a human being, is going to be a really fun time to live in. But I do think that, the availability of meat to everyone is not too far different from a replicator idea, right? Like the idea is to give everybody the opportunity to have whatever meal that they want. And for a lot of people today, meat is not something that they can realistically just go out to the store and get,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's something that it's
I
not, if
mean,
it doesn't,
sometimes I watch my budget when I go to the
right.
grocery store here in California and try to
Yeah.
get the sustainable, ethical meat. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just gonna eat some broccoli.
But theoretically, I mean, if like like other, industries that the prices come down, if you can make that less expensive than rearing a cow from calf until slaughter, that's something that would be able to give more people access to the protein that's necessary. And who knows what that's going to affect. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that's going to be a really interesting world to live in. I think that like a lot of the democratization from a lot of these fundamental things like food, education, stuff like that we're living in right now, that's going to be an interesting world to live in.
Yeah.
But regardless, I know that the replicator is not happening, but I think that like 3D printing of what you're offering is not too different from a replicator, right? Like if I wanted to have a steak and I wanted it to look like a swan, like the way I wouldn't be able to go and get a cow to make that, right? I would go to somebody like you, and you'd be able to put the cells in such a
Yeah.
way, you know.
I mean, so 3D printing is a really exciting technology, but it actually turns out to be pretty expensive when you think
Mm,
about it in terms of food, because food is a commodity. So it's
mm,
not actually practical to 3D print food unless it's
mm.
just for fun. You can't
Yeah,
really buy 3D printed food at
right.
the grocery store.
No, no, no. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
that's something that's available right now.
Yeah.
I'm saying that in the future, like there's all of these like technologies that are going to be
Yeah.
available once the raw materials are there, right? Like for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. The cell biomass is the first starting point, right? Like
right.
in order to make meat, you need cells. And that's what we focus on. Like, how do we make a lot of cells, delicious cells, really affordably? But I wanted to give you another idea, a preview of the future of cultivated steak. And it's actually closer than you think.
Hmm. What do you mean?
So there are already companies in the plant-based meat sector that are working on steak products. And they're actually quite good when it comes to texture. So you
Mm,
can actually arrange plant proteins in a way that gives you the impression of meat. One of the challenges that's still missing is the flavor. And really, that's where you can actually use cultivated cells to mix in with these structured plant proteins and
mhm,
products to make cultivated steak
mhm.
sooner than you would think without the need for any new technology, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly interesting.
Yeah.
But like what, my frame of reference is from tissue engineering for like
Yeah,
burns and stuff like that, right? So
exactly.
like uh, 20 years ago, you could only make one layer of cells, right?
Mm.
And now you can have distinct layer of cells that, has epidermis, dermis, subcutaneous tissue. And that's something that wasn't available to us in the past, right? And now a lot of companies are out there and they're making distinct layers, which I feel like is the next situation for something like meat, right? Like not only are you going to get that muscle component, but you'll also have the tendon component, the fat component, and that all of those things together is going to make a much more similar meat experience. I just feel like we're in just like the first steps of this journey, and that's
Or
exciting to see.
maybe people will just like evolve what they think about meat. Maybe we can not think about it in terms of cows and chickens and pigs anymore, but we
Yeah,
can abstract it a little bit. I think that's entirely possible too.
yeah,
Like the way that we think about it and how we eat it can also change. I just I this is a personal philosophical view, so I'm not representative of sci-fi. But yeah, I don't think we have to like re-engineer the cow. I think we can abstract the cow. Like what's great about a cow? What's great about meat? Can
mm-hmm.
we figure out really efficient and interesting ways to produce that and create new food products that
Mm-hmm.
have great nutrition and great flavor, but maybe, don't look like old-fashioned cow. And maybe in 100 years, like our grandkids will be laughing at us, like, why would we be eating cows? That's like so
Yeah,
gross. We
yeah,
all want our cultivated meat products. Those are way better, way more interesting. You can have them swan shaped. You don't need to like worry about a cow. Could be great.
yeah. No, I totally agree. I always try to have that thought experiment where like, what in 20 years am I going to be embarrassed about doing? And it's something that often comes in like our dinner parties where we're just talking about stuff like that. And then, a lot of people will say things like fossil fuels and stuff like that. But I always bring up the idea of animal slaughter. I think that that's something that is just like so close, right? Like, I mean, we're like, there's cultures out there that are slaughtering dolphins, right? And that's something that is definitely a to me something that is not okay for, and I think it's not okay for a lot of people. But I think that the Overton window is going to shift. Eventually we'll be looking at just animals in general, that this is not something that we want to be a part of as a society, as a species. And then hopefully things like what you guys are creating can come in and veer us away from that.
Well,
But
yeah, we're working on making viable alternatives that people can
Mhm.
actually buy at the grocery store. And when consumers have the choice to get something awesome at a great price point that doesn't involve any of that, then
Mhm.
things will change.
Yeah, I like the fact that you abstract it out to away from the cow, because when you take it out and it just becomes a source of nutrition with these particular elements that we
Yeah.
need, I feel like it allows for more creativity, a lot more options
Yeah.
when it comes to food. I hope that that's one of the directions that we go to, because right now so much of the industry is about taste, and taste in such a way that like we continue to come back for this over and over again.
Mm.
I think that like fast food, for example, it's a lot of really good things that just hit all of these pleasure centers in our brain such that we just get so addicted to it, and that's something that I really want to have for the food industry, is that we're eating not only for health but also for just creativity, for the experience. I think a lot of restaurants are trending like that, and experiential dining. I think that's something that, you know especially for a new technology like yourself, that's probably going to be some of your earliest adopters, right? Is like these
Yeah.
high-end restaurants that you're talking about that want to experiment a little bit.
We're actually not really thinking about high-end restaurants. We want to target restaurants that are more accessible to the average consumer, especially since we're working on a burger product. So
Mhm.
we don't need to go fine dining. I think yeah, we're thinking about more accessibility, but yeah, the all protein is just like so important for the future of nutrition and health, right? Like we
Mhm.
know now that these high carbohydrate diets aren't doing anyone any favors, and it's really like driving this epidemic of metabolic syndrome. And so I'm excited to be working on technology that develops like healthy proteins so that we can have more protein for humans to eat and sort of
Mhm.
cultivate better diets.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the I had a biological anthropologist on a few weeks ago.
Ooh, cool.
He was, yeah, I know. So his thesis was interesting. He
Ooh,
was very negative on the most recent agricultural revolution of processed foods, because
yeah.
he worries about the amount of forces that are used to crush them. He feels like we're eating too soft of a diet, right? And because we're eating too soft of a diet, our jaws are not developing, and so that leads to a whole host of different issues, you know.
Interesting.
But yeah, so that there's that theory that's out there. There's also like a theory that goes even further back that he was telling me about, is that his the idea of like the human brain expanding exponentially, a lot of it was due to just the easy access to high energy, high, like, very densely nutritious food. A lot of that came from cooking. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I hope that we get out of this. I feel like we've kind of gone in the opposite direction a little bit, where now it's just all about taste, not so much about nutrition. And for us to really get back to the opposite side, we have to have something happen. Like, something has to change for how our actual food products are being made, how they're being delivered. Just our whole theory of why we're eating food, I think, has to be addressed. And it's not going to happen unless somebody changes it, like yourself. There's too
Um,
much there's too much bias and too much self-interest, I think, in the food on company right now.
I mean, it's all about incentive structures, right? And I mean, I get it. If you're a big CPG company making food, you want to sell more of it. And so, boy, you want to have your team of food scientists making it as tasty as it can be. But that might not ultimately have like the public health impact that we want more broadly. But I think that's a really interesting question for, individuals, society, but also government. Like, how do we think about the food system? Where do we put our incentives? Where do we put our money? What industries and what sectors do we promote? Because we've had, like 50, 100 years of farm subsidies where we're paying farmers to grow tons of corn, to overproduce corn. And then we have all this readily available input into the sort of rise of really ultra processed food where we take the corn, split it apart into its constituent parts and make Twinkies with it.
Hmm.
And so we can choose to put our money somewhere else. Like, that's entirely possible. And yeah, I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so it's like health and longevity epicenter of the world. I think
Yeah,
I get my
it's one of the blue zones, right? Are
is
you
it?
are you close to Loma Linda? Is that's in the Bay Area? No, or did I?
I think that's more
Okay.
south.
Yeah.
No,
Loma Linda specifically is one of the it's one of the blue zones where people live the longest.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
we're blue zones. Yeah, we're all, getting plasma transplants and
Yeah. We're
rapamycin.
like we're like the opposite in Boston. We're like the red zone, if that's the blue zone. Like, people are
I
just living hard lives up here. We drink
I
coffee black. A lot of people still smoke. It's crazy.
really? They smoke?
Not me, but like, I'm just saying there's a lot of smokers
Oh,
in
wow.
Boston. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
really feel like I see that in California as much.
No, we're all off sugar. We're trying to avoid carbohydrates at all costs. No, but I think that
Yeah.
they can get a little extreme. But yeah, and there's really interesting stuff happening. But I mean, ultimately, people can figure out how to change their health and how to change their bodies in positive ways. And
Mhm.
as more and more people figure out the role of the food system and that, hey, maybe the stuff that's actually readily available, we shouldn't be eating because it doesn't promote health. And like, I don't know. I think it's complex, and I'd love, more help from society and the government in general to like move these things, because I don't think it's fair if you have a grocery store full of stuff that's not health promoting, and then, consumers go in, they shouldn't feel bad that they're like buying this stuff. Like, that's what it's being sold to them.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell. Like, you can, I basically work in the food and nutrition space, and like sometimes I even go crazy, like looking at these packages and like, is this protein bar healthy or not? And so I just try to eat some eggs instead.
So what are you doing in your own life? Are you on any particular diet or anything in of interest?
Yeah, of course. I do intermittent fasting, so I try not to eat breakfast. So I
Okay.
have kind of a smaller eating window. And then I try to focus on healthy proteins and vegetables. So I
Hmm.
try to minimize how much processed carbohydrate I eat. Um,
Mm.
but I might go to In-N-Out after we're done with this.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
but I try to most of the time just focus on like vegetables and protein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been trying like a whole bunch of different stuff. I ordered like a meal service now that like sends you these like little prepackaged meals that are theoretically more nutritious. but I've been on it for like a year now and I haven't really noticed a huge difference. And I'm like, why am I bothering with this? Like I should just go back to normal food and stuff. But my problem is that I feel like there's just so many delicious things to eat out there. You know, like that's the issue is that like I see all of this amazing stuff and I want to try it, you know, and I feel like it's hard to say no to that stuff. I mean, even just like nostalgic foods, right? Like today, I have a 2-year-old and she wanted cereal, so I'm like pouring her cereal, and I think, man, it would be so nice to have this super sugary cereal that she's having also. So I poured myself a bowl, and it tasted amazing. It was so good. It was so delicious, you know.
Yeah.
And like it's that's the hard part is that I would love to have something that tastes that good
Yeah.
that is much more healthy for us. Like that's going to be the holy grail, right? Like when we have all of that pleasure without any of the negative aspects of it.
I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, well, I
It
don't
is
know.
possible to train yourself to sort of eat the food that's available, and it's possible for that food to be more nutritious. Because you totally could have had an amazing like bowl of yogurt with some fruit on it. That
Oh,
would have
come on.
it would have
That's not the same. Like the
it's
like
totally the same. I think
yeah.
that tastes better, honestly. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. Like I won't take that away from you.
We could put like
But
a little honey on it. Oh my God, that'd be so amazing.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's definitely good, but man, like sugary cereal, like a lot of those like really high sugar, high fat kind of stuff, just like In and Out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's designed to hit all of these pleasure centers, and like
Yeah.
I could say no to that, and I could, live my life without having access to those pleasure centers being turned on, but I think it's a much more fun life and much more interesting to eat whatever it is that you want. That's why I really hope that companies like yours are out there and just change it from the ground up, so that I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about that. So get
We're
on it, Kasia.
we're making hamburgers though, so I don't know if
I
that's
love
gonna solve their
hamburgers.
problem.
I love hamburgers. Hamburgers are like one of my
Maybe
top
skip the French
foods.
fries.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really have a hamburger without French fries. That should be your number two. That should be the number two technology where you make like
Healthy.
potatoes out of like, air or something like that. Something that's like zero cal potatoes. Oh my God, Nobel Prize would be zero
I
cal
will let the
potatoes.
food science team know about your
Yeah,
request. We'll add
actually,
that
I'll
to
write
the
them an official letter. Just
perfect. Have
be
Chat GPT
be
write it
ready.
for you, of course.
Yeah,
Save some time.
no, this would be a personal. This is a
Okay.
something that I want to handle personally. Yeah. So how do you like your burger? Like what is like when you're eating burgers, what's your go-to?
Well, I've won at least one burger cook-off, and I won with a
Oh,
very
really?
yeah,
Wow. Good for you.
like 3 people. But
With the meat that you make, or this is
no.
normal meat? Okay.
Uh, we only do taste tests under informed consent, so I can't really play with our product.
Oh,
I kind of like a traditional fast food burger, so kind of like the In-N-Out burger. And so that is like a smash burger with
mm-hmm.
onions and American cheese, and then
Mm-hmm.
ketchup and mustard, and like just the hand leafed lettuce and a slice of tomato and a boring bun. And that's like my epitome. I think I have fond childhood memories of eating at McDonald's as a kid.
Yeah.
My family came from Poland and we were really poor when we first came to the United States. So that was like a treat my parents could give the kids every once in a while, as they would take us to McDonald's. And I have like great nostalgic memories of kind of eating that food. Now I'm a little bit more highbrow, so I kind of like my In-N-Out. But my
Yeah.
son loves McDonald's, so I get him chicken nuggets there. I
Yeah.
have not found anything today that like gets me excited. The McDonald's had the McPlant for a while. I did order that a few times, but yeah, right now I'm just getting him the nuggets. Like for me, I've kind of moved on.
Yeah. 3 of my birthdays below the age of 10 were at McDonald's. So I have like this deep-seated love for that
Yeah,
place. I do a lot of like international traveling, and so you're out in this location for like
yeah.
weeks at a time, and you come back and you see that McDonald's in the airport, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm home again. You smell the smell, something about it that really, really has a fond place in my heart. But what I don't like these days with burgers is that they're adding all of this extra stuff to it. Like the way that you had it is great, just basic, right? Lettuce,
No
tomatoes.
avocado, no bacon,
Oh,
no
like putting
caramelized
eggs on it
onions.
and stuff.
Eggs?
Yeah, there's like a place down the street here that's known for this burger where they put like a sunny side up egg, so like when you're biting, like the yolk comes out, and it's just too much, like let's just focus on the basics first. But yeah, it was really nice talking to you. We're getting to the end of our time. I'd like to go over the three questions that we have with all of our different guests. It was really interesting talking with you about science fiction, and that's one of the things that I ask all my guests, is that for me, a lot of my inspiration comes from science fiction. I think of the utopian worldview that you had talked about. That's something that I aspire to. I look excited, or I look at the future in fashion, because I think about all the things that have the potential to happen, especially when it comes to, just our daily lives of having less manual labor, more time to have interactions like this with different people. So what are the science fiction um, uh, pieces of media that have inspired you to where you are right now? Like, what do you really look towards and like, man, like that's something that I want to replicate?
Well, I'm a Star Trek kid, so I
Oh
grew
yeah,
up
me
on
too.
Star Trek Next Generation.
Okay, cool. Me too.
That probably warped my mind.
Oh
Uh,
no, I think it made your mind for the better. It teaches you
I
so much about morality and
I
like,
know, it's great,
you
and
know,
yeah, so I'm a Star
character.
Trek kid, yeah, but these days I'm more into just science. There's so much cool stuff happening in science, so
Yeah.
it's like my, like, favorite, daily, like, email is from, like, the Nature email update, and you can kind
Mhm.
of just get little vignettes about all this, like, insane technology that's happening, like, innovations in like scanning people's brains and being able to actually start understanding what they're thinking. And I
Yeah.
know that can that can be challenging, like the implications of that, but it's so cool. I don't
Mhm.
know. And I think all this like organ transplantation that's happening with engineered organs, like working to solve the issue with like lack of availability of transplant organs. It's like so exciting. And I think a lot of it is biology too, but it's a really cool time to be in biology and a biologist because we have so much technology that's like changing human lives. So mostly just inspired by science these days, but I definitely grew up on Star Trek.
Yeah, no, I same. I'm a big fan, and I'm a fan of all science fiction. And I think it's important to look at the dystopian and the utopian, but I don't think that there's a better utopian vision than the one in Star Trek, where we're living in this post-money, post-scarcity society where our daily life is just about maximizing our potential, maximizing our human experience. I really look forward to that day. I think that's gonna it's definitely not, maybe not within our lifetimes, but maybe within our kids' lifetimes, that they'll be able to have something like that. So that brings me to my next question is, what industry other than yourself, and I know you have a hard science background, which I really appreciate, because so much talk is focused on stuff that I wouldn't consider to be hard science, like artificial intelligence, robots, like all this. I mean, robots is an engineering feat, but it's not necessarily like, when I think of hard science, I think about like the fundamental understanding and building of new technologies. So what are some things that you're excited about other than your field? Like you said, science in general, but when something comes in your newsletter about A, B, or C, what like is like, okay, that's pretty awesome. I want to learn more about that.
Yeah, so living in the Bay Area, I'm super excited about longevity. I think it's so exciting what's happening in terms of thinking about behavior modifications, but also drugs that we can use to expand human health span. So I just turned 40 and I feel awesome. I feel like I'm a 20-year-old. And now I can imagine a future where I'm, 60 or 70 and I feel as awesome as I do today. And I think that's super exciting and really something that I pay attention to. But it's interesting that a lot of that is just behavior modification too, right? It's choosing what you eat and choosing how much exercise you do that can have this inordinate impact. So that's really exciting. What else? I mean, generally sustainability. So carbon capture is really cool. Thinking about, are there ways that we can sequester carbon from the atmosphere and help mitigate climate change? So I think that really is hard tech, and there's a lot of stuff going on for people pulling CO2 and carbon out of the air and transforming it into useful things. So that's super interesting. And then what else am I excited about? Yeah, I think those are two biggies. Yeah.
Longevity to me is super interesting. More so the age reversal rather than like life
Yeah.
extension. This guy, I forgot his name, but he is working on the Yamanaka factors, that
Yeah.
reverse
Yeah.
the cellular aging to
Yeah.
before it differentiates. And it was so popular that he had a conference like literally across from where I live. There's this conference center the that's right next to MIT. And for whatever reason, it always has like these amazing conferences. But this conference, this guy was talking, and there were so many people that were in this huge conference room that it was packed to the point where they had to call the fire department in and start clearing people out. So there's a lot of interest there.
Yeah.
It's this guy is like a rock star, and he's,
Cool.
the lead researcher on this type of age reversal. I think that's going to be awesome,
Yeah.
because I'm on the other end of the spectrum. Like I just turned 40 also, and I feel every bit of this 40. Like I don't feel like that. I feel like I'm 50. I
We
did
gotta
this.
get you weightlifting and running. I can get you a program.
No, that's the problem is that I do all of that stuff.
Oh
I did a Spartan race yesterday, and I woke up this morning and I was like, oh my God, my whole body hurts. I don't know if I'm going to do this podcast. I was like this close to, canceling, but, I made it through. Point being is that doing that kind of strenuous exercise now has a hugely different effect on me. Like I've
yeah.
been doing the same race for like 4 years in a row. And then this race, I've had the worst recovery that I've ever had. And a lot of it is it's like a multitude of different reasons. A lot of it is because of my diet. Like I haven't really been, I've been eating all those things that I've been telling you that I've been trying to avoid, right? Like I just had a huge bowl of sugary cereal yesterday. Anyway, point being is that I'm looking forward to the reversal aspect. Like I would
Okay.
love to live like this till I'm 60, but what I'm more excited about is the ability to turn back the clock. I think that's going to be really interesting. So last question, where do you see this industry in 10 years, especially the food industry? And what do you hope that you see out of it in 10 years?
No, I think in 10 years, products made through precision fermentation and cellular agriculture are just gonna start taking up legitimate space in the grocery store. I think we're here at a turning point, and in 10 years, you're gonna be able to buy various exciting things that you just can't today. But we're
Yeah.
we're really close, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too. I just ordered these strawberries that are vertically grown in New Jersey that are the sweetest
Cool.
strawberries ever created. And they're built on a vertical farm, very controlled environment,
Yeah.
but they concentrate all of the sugars into this thing. Supposedly it's like 100 times sweeter than a regular strawberry. So I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. But like that doesn't
Okay.
exist. So I want people
Yeah.
to know that that stuff is out there, that it's coming down the pipeline. Hopefully we could have a meat that just blows your mind that's synthetically grown from SciFi Food. That would be really interesting to have. But I'm really looking forward to all these different food experiences. And thank you so much for talking with us about them. The best of luck to you. I can't wait to have that burger that you're finally going to get cleared. I would love for you to send me over, and I'll cook it up the way that you tell me to, and I'll give you
Okay.
my honest feedback on it. But regardless, everybody look forward to this new technology that's coming down the pipeline. If you're more interested in seeing what Kasia has to offer, check out her company, SciFi Foods. And for those of you guys who are listening on a regular basis, we love having you. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, please like and subscribe. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you in the future. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.